It's all in your hands. Unlock your potential with your dream team.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Derege Demissie. I'm a criminal defense lawyer based in Boston. I work as a criminal defense lawyer in both state and federal courts. I am a lawyer with the law firm of Demissie and Associates. Previously, I was with Demissie and Church. And prior to that, I worked at a few law firms, and I also worked for the state and major felony defense. I've been practicing law for about 27 years, and in Boston, I've handled cases in DC, Las Vegas, New York, Virginia, and California as well. I also represent a few nonprofit organizations as in-house counsel, but my primary practice is in the area of criminal defense. And mostly these days, I tend to do a lot in federal court. I also handle serious felonies in state court for cases ranging from minor offenses to murder cases. And my last murder trial was about a year and a half ago, representing a person charged with first-degree murder and felony murder, and he was found not guilty. So he was able to walk out of the courtroom with me.
Sounds like you're very successful in helping your defendants deal with their issues.
Yes, I am pleased to say that I've handled over 65, maybe, jury trials. I've handled thousands of criminal cases. As you know, most criminal cases don't go to jury trials. Very few do. And of those cases that I've tried, I won almost 95% of them. And I think I'm the only lawyer in Massachusetts who won 4 federal trials in a row. And
wow.
The one you just mentioned is my 4th win. And I had not guilty verdicts in the last 3. As you know, in 2018, 4 people got not guilties out of 1,000 people. So,
when the government brings something to trial, usually they feel it's a Loctite case.
Exactly. And the federal government, especially, they investigate over a course of a year. They would have access to the defendant's phone. They would wiretap. They would get all iCloud information, and they would use what is called the FISA warrant, which they used in my case recently, without the person knowing it. And they would follow the person. And in Mr. Liang's case, when they went to search his house, 24 agents showed up.
Wow.
Over a course of 9 hours or 8 hours. They got there around, I think, 5:30 or so. They didn't leave until 1 or 2 p.m. So, yeah, they took a whole bunch of things, most of them just, commemorative plaques that he received from the Chinese embassy when he visited in DC, a belt that has a Chinese police emblem on it, PRC flags, things that people would have in their house if they ever visit China.
Yeah.
And I'm pleased to say we got everything back. So,
I had over a decade of my executive career where I was in China like every month, right? Meeting with customers. And some of those customers were government customers, selling communications to a city or a province.
and they would all give you gifts.
They give you gifts. They give you flags. They give you
It's very common.
things to put on your shelves or your walls. Very nice. They
Yeah.
look really expensive, but in China, some things would be expensive here, but would be easy to buy over there. It's no big deal.
So that's pretty
Yeah.
much what happened. He was actually at a conference in DC, and organized by this umbrella Chinese organization, a nonprofit. And he left in the middle of the conference to visit the embassy, and he was there for a couple of hours. And he took a picture while he was there. One of the gifts they gave him is a plaque that has the different branches of the Chinese police departments. And it says police at the bottom. So that was used as an exhibit to show some connection with the Chinese police.
No, he was like a hotel worker, right? He's not like a executive at a tech company
No.
or a government research facility.
No, this is an individual who worked as a dishwasher for 10 years, worked his way up to up the chain to sort of become his most recent position is part of the banquet crew at
Catering,
at a big hotel.
catering.
And he and his wife worked for the same large hotel chain and raised two kids, both of whom went to Harvard. And my client would wake up, would work overnight shift, would wake up, would come home, take the kids to the library, and he would literally sleep at the desk while
Wow.
studying. That's how and the wife went to work during the day. He's a very hardworking guy, but he's a community activist. And as a community activist, he would organize passport renewals and visa issuance by the consulate office from New York. He would have people come over as part of his family association community activism. They would have embassy people come to Boston, and they would have a 2 or 3 day passport renewals so that elderly people don't have to travel to New York or DC for those services. And because of that, he has a lot of contact and connection with embassy officials. And he would text back and forth. And those texts were used as evidence of him providing information to Chinese government. And
It seems to me like he was providing a valuable service both for the community as well as for the country, because he was facilitating the assimilation of immigrants to become the American population, right?
Absolutely. One of the witnesses who was interviewed by the FBI told the FBI that he deserves an award, not an arrest.
Right.
But the thing is, these people who have contacts with the embassy for various reasons are looked at with suspicion. And if you have contacts with the Canadian embassy, no one would really think twice about it. And but if you have contacts with Chinese officials, so when we tried the case, actually, I told the jury, when the government mentions PRC, Communist Party China, I asked them to think of Canada. Every time you hear China, think Canada. And in Canada, they have their own unification issue between the French and English speaking. And I explained that. And I said, he's a one China person. He likes the unification of China. In this country, you're allowed to have political opinion. You can have a political opinion that aligns with the Chinese government. You're allowed to do that as an American or as a person in this country who's protected by the Constitution. I just want to make clear that you don't have to be an American citizen to be protected by the Constitution. Anyone within the jurisdiction of the United States, whether you're in the United States or in one of the territories, if you're within the jurisdiction of the United States, you enjoy the constitutional rights that are provided to everyone. And the most important constitutional right, in my opinion, is the right to free speech and free association, which is within the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. And what that means is a person is entitled to pursue a political opinion that is in parallel with a foreign government. Allowed to pursue a political opinion that aligns with the interest of a foreign government. What you cannot do is operate under the direction and control of the foreign government. If you operate under the direction and control of the government, you would have to notify the Attorney General by sending a letter saying, I am operating as an agent of the Chinese government, or I'm operating as an agent of the Canadian government, and you send that piece of paper and you're good. You can provide information, you can work, you can be a mouthpiece for the foreign government, so long as you notify the Attorney General. If you are working under the direction or control. Now, this is where the tricky part is. The government would say, we have all these different pieces of evidence. We have this contact, we have this email, we have this text where this person said, thank you for cultivating me. Thank you for your mentorship, or something like that, which a person may say as a matter of just conversation, or to make someone else feel like they've done something important for them. Not necessarily because they were actually cultivated, or they are actually working under the direction of that person. But when you have that kind of text, that can be taken out of context, and they say, look, he said to use the word cultivate. Now, the other interesting part in the case is they translated Chinese to English. It doesn't really work directly that way. And when you translate Chinese, Mandarin, or Cantonese, whatever Chinese language, all of them work the same way. You're translating the concept. And
cultivating can have many meanings too. Like a cultivated person in America is someone who's sophisticated, educated, cultured, right?
exactly. So when you translate the concept, it doesn't quite translate the way that the person might have said it in the Chinese language. So it's very important for me to cross-examine the FBI interpreter and get into a little bit of how she translated it and the word choices that were available to her and the discretion involved in the translation.
Right.
So we can talk about other things. There was also an expert, a Chinese expert the government used, and we did my cross-examination of him. I think I'll get the transcript at some point and make it available, because that is the one expert the government keeps using in all these Chinese cases. And by the time I was done with the cross-examination, I mean, it was clear that he was useless. And I mean, the whole concept of someone being an expert on China is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like if you have a trial in China, in Beijing, and you bring a guy who's been to the United States a few times as an expert on America. How comical is that, right?
Yeah.
And what is being an expert on America to begin with? Can you be an expert on America? Can you be an expert on everything American? So
No.
this guy, so my cross-examination of him was, how many government departments are there in China? Thousands. Okay. How many people do they serve? Over 1.5 billion. How many documents do they produce? Millions of documents, 5, 10. How many of that do you read? It's like, this is like his side job, right? And his part-time occupation. But also, the case was not about China. It was about Chinatown, Boston, how the Chinatown community in Boston operates. So the case is about my client. It's not about China. And I asked him how much time he spent in Chinatown in Boston. And I had a lot of fun with him to show that he doesn't know how the family associations operate. He doesn't know how the community operate. He has no idea about the interactions with the embassy through the passport renewals and visa issuance and all that. And by the time I was done with him, it was just completely useless for the government. And I actually got to talk to the jurors afterwards, and they told me they completely dismissed him.
So are these like the key legal arguments that you're revealing here with our audience?
Absolutely. You know, the main thing is not to be afraid to fight the case.
Mm.
That's the number one thing, because when the federal government comes at you with 24 agents and they knock your door and at 5:30 a.m. and they wheel out all of the stuff from your house and they charge you with a crime like this and you're facing 15 whatever years in prison, the tendency is to say, what can I do to avoid going to jail?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people would say that, as opposed to, I'm going to fight the federal government,
Mm-hmm.
fight the United States government. It takes a lot of guts to be able to say that.
Does it take a lot of money also?
Of course, it does.
Yeah.
But in the Chinese community, they're able to raise money if they need to. Um, um, you know, obviously, if you can't afford a lawyer, I was privately retained, but if my client was in a position that he was not able to hire a lawyer, the court would have appointed him a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And the federal lawyers that get appointed to cases are really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm one of them. For example, I would take a case on appointment from the federal court. There's so few federal cases, unless you are on the CJA list, which is the Criminal Justice Act list. You don't really get a lot of good practice. So we all take cases. All the private lawyers who
Mm-hmm.
have private cases also take cases on appointment. And
Mm-hmm.
the amount of time and energy I put on a case, it's the same, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's private or appointed. So to give you an example, the 4 cases I won, 2 are appointed, 2 are private. So, it makes no difference to me. But if a client wants to fight a case and says, I want to take it to trial, you need a lawyer who's willing to take it to trial.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of lawyers they're afraid to go to trial
Yeah.
because they don't want to lose, and there's a high probability of losing in federal court. So the tendency is to cut a deal and maybe and avoid the losses. So I talk too much, so I'm going to let you ask a
No,
question.
no. It's fine. I mean, you're
Yeah.
revealing a lot of good insights here that this audience should know, should learn
Yeah.
about.
So number one, it's important to step back and look at the case and see whether you can win the case. Number two, it's important for witnesses to come forward. I had a lot of difficulty bringing people in, friends who were in a position to testify as to what they know, but they were afraid. People who did not want to get involved. Some people who were friends or who were close to my client were afraid to even have conversation with him. And when someone is in this situation, it's so important for the community to support them. And that's what it means to be a community. That's what it means to be a member of, a support group. So it's important for people to step forward if they are able to testify with, truthfully with information. It's important for people not to ostracize people just because they're charged with a crime, to shy away from them and label them as a spy or an agent. Let the process take its course, and then we'll find out if the government's case is actually valid or not. It's important that a person in this country is presumed innocent.
Yeah.
Being charged with a crime doesn't mean the person is guilty. It actually takes very little to charge someone with a crime.
Right.
The standard of proof you need to charge with a crime is called probable cause. It's basically the lowest level of standard of proof.
Yeah.
You just need a little bit of information to believe a crime might have been committed. So let's charge this guy. But to prove someone guilty, it has to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's really where the fight is, to see if the government's case can establish proof beyond reasonable doubt. And a good lawyer will have to look at the case look at the conduct, look at the evidence, and decide whether it's worth taking to trial or something that has to be resolved short of trial.
Mhm. You know, what I've observed in American history touches on a point you made. You know, this country was formed on waves of different immigrant groups over 150, 200, 225 years, right? And in each case, they had to band together. Uh, and when an individual was targeted, either locally or by the federal government or even by, non-government organizations, the individuals of that community had to step forward for that one individual being targeted. And that's what made them a community. The
Right.
ones that didn't do it, eventually everybody got picked off, or a lot of people got picked off, right? Because the other organization was encouraged. They didn't
Yeah.
see any barriers to them doing whatever they wanted, right? So that was a good
Yeah.
point you made about the
Yeah.
individual stepping forward.
There's a big fear among immigrants, especially recent immigrants, parents whose kids are in school. They don't want to ruffle feathers. They want their kids to have, peaceful time in the school. They don't want to be associated with anybody who might be implicated or might be labeled as, a criminal. And the easy thing to do is to just stay away and disassociate from that individual.
Mm,
That's mostly because of misunderstanding or lack of knowledge about how the legal system works.
mm,
I can tell you a number of people came to me while we were waiting for a jury verdict, while the jury was deliberating. They asked me if the FBI would now go knock on the door of the jurors to threaten them. And I was reassuring people that doesn't happen in this country. And, relax. That's just not something that happens. But people have a hard time believing that,
yeah.
so there's a lot of misunderstanding, misconception, mistrust, and there's a lot of need for education.
Mm. Do you feel the government could have done anything better, or did they make any mistakes in bringing these charges to your client?
Yeah, I totally believe that the government jumped the gun. They rushed to label this guy as an agent.
Mm,
They connected dots that had no business getting connected.
mm,
You take 4 years of text messages and you pull one from 2018, another 2019, another from here, and try to, put together a case.
mm,
There's one thing every agent in an agent principal relationship. There's one thing that is common usually that establishes the existence of agent principal relationship, like someone is working as an agent. That is money. People
yeah,
don't volunteer to be an agent without getting paid. And
yeah,
they just didn't have that. They went through his bank account, his financial transactions, and everything.
mm,
And there's no money. He never received any money for anything. So he is a political activist. Yes, he would share public information. Sharing public information is not a crime.
yeah.
He didn't share government secret. He didn't share classified information or trade secret.
Mm,
So you can share information with anyone you want to. If it's public information, anyone has a right to share that. So number one, they think they rushed to judgment, and number two, they could have simply asked him, um, talk to him, and say, "We believe you're acting. What you're doing qualifies as acting as an agent. You should register."
okay.
In fact, they've done that for someone who's acting as a lobbyist, as a very rich individual, and the person said, "I'm not going to register because I'm not an agent," and they filed a civil lawsuit to make him register, but that's not a Chinese American person. So there was so many other options, but I believe they picked him to teach others a lesson.
Yeah.
Also, I believe they picked him believing that maybe he would be so afraid, and then he would come in and tell them about other people.
Yeah.
But there was nothing to tell. And but they suspected maybe there were many others that he could tell about. I think that's part of it. That's, but it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that he had to go through this for over a year and a half. I tried to speed up the process as much as I could. Usually these cases take 3-4 years. We did it in very, very short period of time for a federal case. Literally, we had the first trial date was January 3rd,
Mm.
and the government made disclosures late. And I asked for just 1 month. And actually, we started on January 28th. So even after we selected the jury, they gave me additional discovery they should have given me earlier. And their argument was that I should ask for additional time. I asked the judge to either dismiss the case or exclude their evidence. And the government's counter argument was, we gave it to him late. Whether we should have given it to him or not. And if he doesn't like it, he should just ask for additional time. They didn't really want to go to trial, to tell you frankly. They wanted to delay the case. And I said, no, we're going to go to trial. It's okay. So we went to trial in record time, I think.
They wanted to wear down your client, huh? Because for them to push the case out doesn't hurt them, right? They're just working on the case. But for your client, how long is this going to go on, right?
Yeah, that's number one. And number two, we were very strategic in our jury selection. They gave me this whole bunch of stuff after we picked the jury. And, they just probably didn't like the way things were heading. But anyways, that's speculation on my part. I am not sure why. However, I was not interested in delaying the case at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's good to take your time and look at all this new stuff they give you. But I was confident there was just nothing more. I believed my client because I've interviewed thousands of people, and I believed him from the day I met him.
Yeah. Now he was arrested in 2023 or charged. Did he spend
Yes.
any time in jail or in prison?
No, he was out on bond with GPS monitoring.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does he have a case to bring back against the government for inconvenience or trauma or anything?
So I'm not a civil lawyer. He could, and there are all these limitations on what, on suing the government for this kind of stuff, but it's possible.
Mm. But that's not your expertise. He would find another lawyer to do that if you.
Yes. And if that case goes to trial, I've tried civil cases. And if that case goes to trial, I would sue. I would be happy to help them with that. Yeah.
So in a similar case, if you were a Chinese American resident in a big city and you're engaged with the community, how might you protect yourself against what this gentleman faced?
So if I am someone who constantly interacts with the Chinese government or the consulate office, I may consider sending that 1-page letter. Doesn't even need to be 1 page, 2 sentences or 3 sentences. I'm engaged in this activity, and if you consider that being an agent, here's my name. I think I would do that, and send that letter by fax or mail to the Attorney General's office. There's um, office address, which is provided by the Department of Justice. But the other thing I would do is I would be very careful in terms of what I would put on a text and how I respond to texts. If someone is acting under direction and control of a foreign government or a foreign official, they should register. There's no question about it. Those are not the people I'm worried about. The people I'm worried about are people who are just activists in the community. And they may be asked by someone to organize an event that involves the Chinese officials or government officials may show up at a New Year's banquet, for example, which they do in Boston. And there may be back and forth. Like in one of the evidence they used in my case was an email someone else sent to my client that was titled Black List and has a list of individuals who should not be invited to a banquet because they would not come anyways. They were pro-Taiwan people.
Okay.
And now my client didn't send that email, he received that email. And there was some text about, we should discuss this with the embassy people because they were the ones who were organizing and paying for the banquet. It's the embassy's banquet, New Year's banquet. So the detail of that did not come out, even though the FBI learned about it. But they just presented this blacklist. And if you are a juror in a criminal case and you hear this guy prepared a blacklist of people and provided it to the Chinese government, that looks bad. But if you find out it's about people who should not be invited to a banquet, that's a different story. So so you look at the evidence, but you gotta do a little bit of digging, investigation, and you'll find, it's so just to be careful how you label things, how you communicate. If you're asked for information and you're not sure what you should do, just be careful about if you respond saying, for example, as per your instruction, here's the information. That sounds like you're working under the direction and control.
Yeah.
And if you're not working under direction and control, you should not word it that way. And yeah, I mean, you can start by saying, just to be sure, I'm providing this out of my own volition. But, the easiest way is if you're going to have that kind of constant interaction, send a letter.
Yeah. That's just to be safe, right?
Correct. Yeah. And if you have other questions, talk to a lawyer. And
I think too, what a person might do is periodically just disagree to do something. I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'm not available.
that is also a good advice. Now, I'm not in the business of telling people what they should and should not say, right? Obviously, if the person doesn't want to do something, they should say that. And they should be, I think the most important thing is make sure you're not operating under control or direction.
Right.
And if you are registered, and if you're not working as under control or direction, do whatever you can to make that clear.
Yeah.
And like you said, it could be, I can't do that. I'm too busy. Also, you can say, I don't want to do that if that's not what you want to do. But just be mindful that your text communication can be used as evidence. So, yeah.
Now, there's quite a few people in this audience who work in a field where they may be developing technology for a company or
Mhm.
doing research, or they're working in academia in a very valuable field, biogenetics, AI. Uh, what would they do? I mean, the guy you represented in the last case was a hotel worker, which is like non-technical, information's not sensitive. What
Yeah.
about this other category of Chinese professional? What would you guide them to do in particular?
So each person has a unique situation in any criminal case. The unique situation is what is that person's obligation within that person's setting. So, for example, you're working with trade secret. What is your obligation regarding trade secret? There are some cases, for example, where there was some funding from the government, US government, for some research, which includes provisions that that research should not be shared with foreign governments. And you need to know exactly what those provisions are. Like if you're a second, third tier scientist working on a project, you may not have access to the actual provisions that govern that whole project. So you got to be cognizant of what your obligations are within that organization. Number one. Number two, what is it that is protected, excluded, or made out of the provisions that require non-disclosure? So in criminal cases, they all have to do with mens rea, meaning the government has to prove some type of mental culpability. Now, ignorance of the law is not a defense. If you know what you're passing is a secret document, and you say it's not enough for you to say, I did not know this document was something that I should not have shared, right? But if you believe it's a public document and you shared it, maybe it's a different story. So the circumstances of each case is different, and it depends. The facts matter for each case. Each case is different. So, for example, in New York City, there was a police officer who was NYPD officer who was charged with a crime, being an agent, and the government ended up dismissing the case after he spent some time in jail. And he's an ex-Marine officer, Marine
The
or
soldier.
soldier.
No.
And so every case has its own unique features. The advice is I would give is know your role, know what the parameters are, and make sure that you don't do anything that opens you up for prosecution. And if you don't know, consult with a lawyer, could be within the department where you work, or it could be outside. And anytime anyone, especially in this environment, shares anything with anyone connected to the Chinese government, and that is a huge organ. And when you look at embassy officials, the consular officers, most of them were trained or were members of the Ministry of Public Security. Yeah, I think they call it MPS or something. And Ministry Department of Public Works, or the different organizations that are connected to the Chinese government and or the Chinese Communist Party. So every time these individuals come to the United States, they will fill out a visa application, whether it's a diplomatic visa or regular visa. And they are required to disclose their prior employment, education, and stuff like that. And their phone numbers is available to the US government. So, my guess is if the Chinese official is communicating with an agent, they probably won't use their cell phone. But in my case, my client was communicating with their personal cell phone, which was linked to this person, and the person's visa application shows their history, and the government produced all that as evidence, saying this guy was communicating with this defendant, and here's his visa application, and he listed his involvement with the police, and he was trained here, he did this, he was an intelligence officer, and now he's at the embassy consulate. Why do you think he's communicating with this guy? So,
Yeah.
So know who you're talking to. Know who you're talking to and you're communicating with. So that's another thing. It's important for people to know if someone asks them for information, who that person is. And
It'd be more suspicious if you're being contacted by the same individual as opposed to different people from within an embassy or a Chinese organization.
yeah, so the thing is, the consular people, they shuffle in and out frequently. And so, for example, if you're a community activist, you're dealing with someone now, they rotate out in 2 years, another person comes in, they will introduce you to that new person, and you will know a number of them. And it's not uncommon for a Chinese American who may be active in the community to have phone numbers of 4, 5, 6 consular officers. And some of the witnesses in my case have a number of people on their phones. And it's just common sense that if you meet with a consular officer and they give you their contact information, you will put it on a phone just in case you need their service or you want to help someone in the future. So, but that was used as evidence against my client. Look at all the number of people he has saved on his phone who have connection with the Chinese government.
Yeah, but that was his role as an activist, is to be plugged in and to know who to contact in the case of
Exactly. Exactly.
a kid from the old country or
Exactly. And when you go to China, you as part of a delegation or individually, it's common to meet with officials. They may chaperone you, take you to different places. You take pictures with them. They use those pictures also as exhibit. So, anything can be turned into an exhibit. I don't want to scare people not to do these things. You are entitled to do any of these things. You have a right to travel, take pictures with whomever you want to take pictures. Yeah. And the point is simple. If you're working as an agent under direction or control, send a piece of paper. If not, make sure your communication is clear that you are not acting under direction or control.
What if they're not sure? You said to request to the Attorney General, right? You give them the information that.
Yeah, so there are very few people, I think, who, not few, but could be a larger number, who communicate with officials and work with officials of the Chinese government for any number of reasons, to pursue a parallel interest, common interest, whatever. And I would err on the side of sending a letter describing what you're doing and saying, they're not paying me anything. They're not asking me to be an agent, but I communicate with them. I work with them on these different things. If you consider that to be being an agent, here's my name and address. That's it.
Now, Mr. Litan Liang, he was a citizen, right?
Correct.
And how long had he been a citizen?
For many years.
When you're using a private lawyer in a criminal case like this, what would be the rate that lawyers would get paid? This is a question from the audience.
Yeah, so my rate fluctuates between 450 to 650, depending on the client and the circumstances. Sometimes I feel the injustice of charging the person who cannot afford my services, who's put in a position that they should not have been put in by government overreach or some type of injustice. I've cut my rate down to 450. I've taken cases on, uh, let me just say, even pro bono. I've done it. So important thing is talk to a lawyer. The rate depends from lawyer to lawyer, and you can probably negotiate something that makes sense for you. Yeah, so there's some lawyers who charge 800, 900, 1,000. Large firm lawyers may charge 1,500. One of the witnesses in my case went to consult with a lawyer and met with them once, and they sent a $20,000 bill, which,
Oh,
some lawyers do that, you know.
wow. Unconscionable. That is unconscionable.
Yeah,
You found
but
that
I consider myself as a public interest lawyer to an extent. So yeah.
now, would you say that you are experienced in working with Chinese in these cases or focused on it? What would you say? How would you?
So to answer your question, there's no one person in this country who has handled, I would say, more than two, maximum three of these cases. It's just this is the first one in Boston, for example. So there's no expert handling Chinese agent cases.
Mhm.
Um, they've filed them all over the place. Some were dismissed, but of those they tried, this is the first one they lost.
Mhm.
So I can say I'm the one who won any after a trial. And I've represented a number of Chinese American individuals. I have right now another case involving a Chinese individual with a charge involving money laundering and running an illegal bank transaction, sending money overseas and exchanging money, that kind of stuff. I've represented Chinese individual charged with running a brothel. So different cases, when you do a criminal defense, whatever comes to you is what you handle.
So
And
that would have been a state level crime, right?
no, those were federal. The ones that I mentioned were both federal.
What?
Running the brothel where they were bringing people from outside of the state.
Oh,
So that yeah, yeah.
was that like a human trafficking type of crime?
Yes, but it involved also money laundering aspect. So that's why they charged them in federal court.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would you say these types of crimes are increase? I mean, the charging, is it on the increase? Is it flat? Is it decreasing? What's
You
your,
mean the Chinese American
yeah.
cases?
Hmm.
So I think they will continue to charge people. I had some conversation with some prosecutors after the new attorney general said they're not gonna prosecute a lot of these FARA prosecutions. But they made a distinction between the FARA and the agent one. The FARA is the Foreign Agent Registration Act,
Hmm.
and those prosecutions, the most known ones were the General Flynn and Paul Manafort, Trump's friend, who were prosecuted by the Attorney General's office.
Mhm.
And the new Attorney General said, we're not going to focus on that. We're going to shift our focus to different types of crimes. So I asked prosecutors if that includes these Chinese agent cases. And they response to me was, in the memo, there's an exception to, except for, we're not going to prosecute FARA cases except for those cases that fall under typical traditional espionage type cases. So they're treating these agent of China type cases as traditional espionage cases. So they are going to continue to prosecute people. The only people they're not going to prosecute are the rich people who act as lobbyists.
So that's Pam Bondi, the new Attorney General?
Yes.
Okay. And when they say traditional, is that related to technology and this kind of
Yeah,
thing?
traditional espionage, technology, giving information, the regular type, as opposed to when you're a lobbyist advocating for a foreign government, when you're lobbying Congress, you're supposed to register. And the prosecution against Flynn, General Flynn, and Paul Manafort was for that kind of. So essentially, the way I understood it is they're not going to prosecute the rich Americans who lobby for different governments.
What about in this case where it was a hotel worker doing some activism, not really dealing with technology or
They're going to treat that as espionage because, according to the government, what they were saying was he was providing list of names of dissidents, pro-democracy dissidents, Hong Kong democracy protesters, pro-Taiwan dissidents. But that's not really what happened. But I think that's their allegation.
Well, it's 7 o'clock. We've answered a few questions from the audience. If there aren't any other questions that pop up, do you want to give any kind of closing statement?
Just say that it was a pleasure representing my client. I learned a lot about the Chinese community in Boston, Chinatown, and I had a very meaningful conversation with Chinese Americans in different states, including California, DC, Atlanta. And I'm impressed by the close-knit nature of the community and the way they follow the information and exchange information. It's just impressive. It's almost as if there's a whole different world that I did not understand fully. And we had a huge celebration in Chinatown recently with 400 or 500 people. It was just wonderful to be able to defend someone who I believed was innocent. And it was a very difficult case, but we fought, and we fought with conviction. And we were not shy to say to the jury, the government was mistaken. They were misleading them. And we're at all times, we're basically on attack from the beginning to end. And I think that's the strategy that won us the case. So my message to people is, don't be afraid. If you're innocent, stand up, fight, and there is justice that you can get in this country.
Well, it's great that our country has lawyers like you. And I'm very impressed that you have such a great batting average, 4 victories in a row, and that you were able to win this case so quickly for your client. I'm sure he is very delighted and thanked you very deeply.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it, and thank you for inviting me. It was fun.
Absolutely. Take care, Derege.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
In a world so connected, respected, it's hard to stand out. But I've got a secret that I'm about to shout. Building bridges and making friends, that's how the journey of success begins. Surround yourself with diverse minds, experts in their field, so wise. Together we'll conquer and achieve. Customize your growth, there's nothing you can't conceive. Build your network, reach for the stars. Professional advantage taking you far. Communication and leadership, it's all in your hands. Unlock your potential with your dream team. With diverse minds, experts in their field, so wise. Together we'll conquer and achieve.